All right, Abi, we're here to talk about measuring these AI agents that are infiltrating our organizations,
They're everywhere.
our lives. They're making us in some cases. In some cases, we do it willingly, but somebody's got to track these things. How you doing it?
Well, it's still early days, but
Okay.
it's the name of the game right now is, firstly, being able to understand how are we using these AI tools, how are developers incorporating them into their workflows, how much value are we getting out of them, what's the ROI, are we spending too much, too little, how do we right size the amount of spend, and then how good are these agents is the other question, and how do we measure AI?
Gosh, are you asking us? We're asking you.
Just setting the scene.
Setting the scene.
Just setting the scene. It's early days, you said, though. It's early days. So you've been in the business of helping organizations understand the developer experience in terms of morale, ability, code being committed, how that affects the organization, how that affects the bottom line. So you've got organizations that essentially hire you as a service or a consultant or however you want to frame that. And you help them determine if their teams are successful and if code is being deployed properly and all that good stuff. You've got to have some sort of pressure from those folks because they're top down at this point. They're saying, okay, developers, you must begin to use this because we're seeing this dramatic increase, and they've got to deploy it in ways where they can test it and try it. So what kind of pressure have you seen from your side?
Quite a lot. I mean, I think I can speak for all of us that I don't think I've ever seen anything like this in the industry where, those at the top are so bought into the promise of a new technology and are pretty aggressively pushing it down. And a good example of that is one thing that's really common is for top-down tracking now of just adoption and utilization. So lots of organizations are looking at monthly active, weekly active, daily active usage by developers. They're segmenting developers into different cohorts based on whether they're super users or low, medium, moderate adopters, and then starting to trying to study, okay, what is that getting us, right? Are the people who are using AI more productive? Are they happier? Is their code better or worse? But yeah, the pressure is unlike anything I've really seen before. And I was just talking to some researchers at one of the prominent AI developer tool vendors, and they said that a lot of this usage that they're seeing, especially of agentic tools right now, they believe is more fear-driven than utility-driven, meaning that people are using a lot of these tools even when they're not really effective right now, because they fear that not doing so will mean that they could become obsolete. So that was a pretty interesting finding.
I blame Steve Yegge. He comes on our show. He starts telling people, "You will be replaced. You better adopt
the
these things
is
right
dead."
now."
The AI vendors have done a fantastic job in their marketing of infecting, the minds of leaders. I even saw like Anthropic's, what they put together, like a economic research, like organization to study the impact of what's going to happen. And, it's like the best PR stunt ever, I think.
For sure. Well, have you guys been surveying? Have you been collecting the data? Do you have anything that you can, definitive or even just gives us a glimpse into what's actually going down on the streets?
Yeah, so we are collecting data from over 400 different organizations now. It's both through surveys as well as looking at their actual telemetry. So DX connects to pretty much all the leading AI coding tools today. So whether that's Copilot, Cursor, Windsurf, et cetera, Claude Code. So we're ingesting that telemetry as well, which gives us real-time view into developer usage and utilization. Some of what we're seeing, first of all, adoption is rising extremely rapidly. Since really about 3 or 4 months ago. I think that's when we started seeing the top-down mandates. That's when the message became, you got to get on board or you're going to be left behind. So like we're seeing that in the data. Yeah, in terms of impact, we see a number of really interesting things. So first of all, on average, and keep in mind, let's call it Q2 2025, because this space is evolving very quickly. On average, developers report saving about 3 hours per week thanks to AI tools. Okay. Now, when you think about put that into context. Well, that's about 5 to 10% of their work week.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we're talking about a 5 to 10% boost. Now, that is a lot less than maybe what you might expect if you were just looking at the headlines or scrolling Reddit. One piece of research it aligns with is Google. I don't know if you guys saw that, they came out, it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, saying, hey, based on our research, we're seeing about a 10% productivity improvement with our developers thanks to AI. So that's one data point. A couple other data points we can kind of dive deeper as you guys wish. Is one of the strongest relationships we're seeing in the data is actually with engagement, meaning developer job engagement. And I think that's really interesting because when you hear some of these OGs like Kent Beck getting into AI augmented coding, one thing you hear them talk about, maybe more so than anything about their productivity, is how much fun they're now having. Mm-hmm. Right? It's just it's a more enjoyable paradigm of working. And so we're seeing that reflected in the data. You don't see that being talked about in the press. Mm-hmm. I don't think people maybe care about that as much right now. It's all about productivity. The last thing I'll share is, whereas we are seeing that around 10% lift in developer time savings, we're not seeing that strong of a correlation in terms of something like code throughput. I mean, actual rate of deliverables being shipped. So that's a little bit perplexing. That's a metric a lot of organizations immediately want to look toward, is are we shipping more PRs because of?
Sure.
And there is a small relationship, but it's not, we can't say it's 10% plus lift across organizations right now. And that raises a lot of interesting questions as to, well, why? And how do the time savings, where are those time savings going? Are some of the interesting questions.
This research is based on Q2 of this year, is that right? So this time window that you're speaking of is basically just Q2.
Q1, and it's really H1 data.
Okay, all of this year, 2025.
Yeah. And I should add that we saw a notable rise in a lot of those numbers compared to H2 of last year. So particularly the adoption metrics, the time savings, those have increased materially since H2 last year.
I don't know about you, Jerry. I want to talk about the fun. I feel like we've been talking about all this productivity and the FOMO and the fear and the slaps in the faces and the you're going to lose your job. Oh my gosh. Let's talk about the fun. Can you talk about the fun, Abi? What do you know about this Kent Beck fun aspect? What is the unlock here that's making this paradigm shift more fun?
I think when GitHub Copilot first came out, it was your AI pair programmer, right? And right. I think
your buddy.
And I think that more interactive, more social form of doing development work, having someone, or in this case, an AI, to where you can get unblocked when you're just in a brain funk, or get really fast feedback on something you're trying to do or that you just did. I think that's more fun. We've heard that from our engineers. We see that out in the field when we're doing research, and you see that from folks like Kent Beck, who are really, or Gene Kim, right, who are talking about how much fun they're having. They haven't maybe been doing as much coding,
sure,
in their careers recently, but they're getting back in because they're having so much fun.
Nick Nisi, I was making fun of Nick a few weeks back on the show, maybe a few months back, because of all of his AI subscriptions. He was confessing all of the money he was spending. And I was saying, he was telling me how he was using it. And I kind of made fun of him and said, well, you're just lonely. You don't actually need help. You just want someone to be there with you. He's like, yeah, totally. And for him, that is the fun, as it feels more alive to just not be alone. Now, people who pair programmed in the past or do at their jobs know what that's like. It can also be exhausting because you're like, you're interacting, you're trying stuff, you're bouncing stuff off a person. And most of us don't have that. I mean, very few orgs buy into, let's put 2 developers on one feature. I mean, that just is a very hard sell. Mm-hmm. And so people who do it swear by it, but very few people will do that because it just doesn't make sense in the leadership's eyes. It's like, okay. But the pair programming aspect of this and just having someone that it's like the rubber duck, but the rubber duck talks back and has ideas and has information. And that's really powerful for, I think, a lot of us. For me personally, Adam said it, unlock. For me, I'm just doing stuff that I wouldn't have tried before because I just don't have time. And I don't have 2 hours for this random idea I just had where I thought this would be nice. Nah, that's too much work. Like I've done that constantly for the last 20 years. And now I'm like, this would be nice. And I'll just go have Claude try it while I'm doing something else. And you feel like somebody else is toiling away and you're just getting that thing done. And sometimes you throw it away and sometimes you use it and sometimes it just helps you with something else. And that for me, specifically, I know I've sung Claude Code's praises many times on the pod because I'm just into it right now. I'm just having fun with that particular tool. Once it was agentic and it was in my terminal and it was good enough that I didn't really have to look at the code as long as I wasn't going to like check it into our main repository and have to maintain it. I'm just coding all kinds of stuff without coding. And for me, all of a sudden I'm having fun. Whereas prior to this, like if you go back the last 2 years, it's been like a Google replacement, but there's nothing fun about replacing Google. You're like, you just get faster answers. But your 10% is interesting because, GitHub's been claiming 50% for a long time, haven't they? I mean, that's been their advertisement on Copilot is 50%. 10% to me seems low, but that's self-reporting and analytical reporting, like you're doing the data on that and people say 3 hours a week, which would be 5% on a 60-hour week, 10%-ish, almost 10% on a 40-hour week. So yeah, 10% is just not, I wonder why it's not higher.
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's important to put the data from folks like GitHub in context. Mm-hmm. A lot of the research, when you hear some of that kind of stuff in the headlines, a lot of that research is based on like controlled studies, controlled experiments. It's like putting 2 groups of developers in a room.
It's a lab.
Give them and I think so that's worth putting in context. I think
sure.
There's a difference between applying these tools to greenfield projects, side projects, small, clean code bases versus applying them to legacy code bases, millions of lines of code, messy, with
lots of context,
microservices. And so I think, and even in programming languages or frameworks that LLMs aren't as well suited for. And so I think there's another interesting trend we're seeing in the same way that there's a big trend still today around, hey, we need to break up our monolith to for a number of reasons, right? Around service reliability and engineering productivity, ownership. I think there needs to be more of a focus right now on all the things that have mattered for humans as far as kind of code-based readability, code-based optimization. I think the same problems hold true for LLMs. I've been talking with larger organizations who've kind of come to the realization they're at a systemic disadvantage in terms of leveraging these tools because their code bases and systems just aren't as optimized for agents and LLMs. Right. And so I think that's a challenge for larger organizations.
Something I want to mention, I'm not even qualified to really mention this deeply, so I just want to touch on it, but expose it, is back to this fun of like the buddy in the room or the pair programmer. Is this phenomenon of a human activity that we're more productive, at least I personally am, when another human is in the room? Even if they're not present for my work, just the social nature of life, I think, bleeds into that. And I wonder if that's, maybe because you've got some doctors on your staff, maybe you've been exposed or through osmosis, you've learned these things, but what do you know about like just not brain activity, but like more like human activity together, just being more productive in the same room. This is something that I've been studying personally, because whenever I am with someone else, for some reason, I'm just able to like just have more energy naturally. And I'm like, why? Why is it like that? And I wonder if that's the same thing here with like developers tend to, in most cases, I'm not sure the percentage is, but a large percentage is alone, solo, sometimes paired programming, but it's more like a particular scenario. It's usually a solo endeavor. Team sport, solo endeavor, right? Team sport, we're all making it, but solo endeavor is like, I'm making this feature or I'm in charge of this. And so I wonder if there's this social aspect that really is now going to be, for the most part, here forever. If we keep this tool in our life, now we always have a buddy. I wonder if that's a thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't seen research on that specifically. Adam, you sound like an extrovert, by the way.
Yeah,
I don't think I'm an extrovert at all. I do not get my energy by hanging out with you all here. When I'm done here, I'm going to go take a nap because I have to. I'm kidding. I'm not going to, but there's some part of me that needs to decompress after an exposure like this. Sure. So I'm definitely not an extrovert. I'm more introverted, but there's this idea of body doubling. There's this phenomenon of body doubling. I really wish I had Marielle Reese here, who co-hosted Brain Science with me, because she knows deeply about body doubling. And that's essentially what you do here is you body double. You have a mirror. You have a buddy, either as a fictitious software program that can act like human, or literally a human in the room that doesn't interact with you, is just sort of there working with you, making you productive. So body doubling is an interesting phenomenon.
So to the 10%, and maybe there's some brain science here, and I'm not a brain scientist either, but I've witnessed in myself more speed and productivity, but like the same amount of output, because I'm just kind of like done for the day or just like happy. You know, I'm just like, well, I wonder if there's like amount of work that a human does in a day, and you can like optimize that on the margins. And some humans are probably more productive than others and stuff. But like for a lot of engineers, especially you've been in the craft for so long, you kind of have this idea of like how much you can do in a day, and then you feel like satisfied. And I wonder if people are, and self-reporting, you probably wouldn't do this because it might be against your self-interest, but like doing what they normally do, but just kind of doing a little bit faster and better, and then doing something else, or, you know, working on having another meeting, having a R&D session, or, you know, going for an extra walk. I wonder if there's any of that in there, because I find myself being like, I could do more, but I've already done what I was going to do. And so I'm going to take a walk.
There absolutely could be another theory, like a lot of theories on it. I mean, another theory could be that in the enterprise or in organizations, application of these AI tools is just still catching up to what, you know, like you were talking about what you're doing with Claude Code, right? Like, for example, we don't necessarily see Claude Code as the leading adopted tool currently in organizations. And in fact, some companies I talk to it's on their radar, but
it's pretty new.
It's pretty new. Another theory, I saw a really good write-up on this recently, is when you actually back it. So let's say, might need to get calculator out here. You know, let's assume that at most companies, engineers spend 20%, 30% of their 40-hour work week writing code. So then if you take that 30%, and then you start plugging in these numbers, like, okay, let's say they're twice as more effective, like double the productivity. So then you take, you know, 30%. So you double that. What's that? So that means like 15% net productivity. Like I said, I'm going to get this wrong doing this live. So when you start backing into it that way, again, the 10% actually, you can see how you kind of get there, being even with a pretty high acceleration of the coding part of the job. You're kind of limited by these other factors, and that's not even factoring just like all the other areas of friction, like as we've talked about before in the podcast, that are holding developers back and that are still currently constraints, even when the writing code part of their job is greatly accelerated.
Right. In other words, it's not as if you're doing coding 100% of your job. Yeah. It's a smaller portion of your job. And if you're doing that smaller portion faster, then you're only speeding up that one thing. And as many of us know, who've been in the industry a long time is the coding part. While it can, require you to sit down for 6 hours and do it, it's not always the limiting factor. It's not the problem sometimes. Code reviews are still very time consuming. And of course, we got to code review this stuff, right? Like the agents aren't quite good enough to just let them to just vibe code in the enterprise. Now, there are people claiming there's vibe coding going on in the enterprise, but I think most of that's rogue and just, trying to beat your colleagues at your job. Unless you have data to the contrary. I'm interested, you said Claude Code isn't very adopted. That makes sense. I mean, these agentic tools, especially, Gemini CLI, like the new CLI tools, we're talking like the last 3-4 months.
Yeah.
And so we're not even going to have data
Gemini's
on that.
like 2 weeks.
Yeah,
2
exactly.
weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, things are moving very fast, and enterprises move traditionally slow depending on the enterprise. Who is winning? Like is it Windsurf? Is it Copilot? Like from your data, what are people using the most?
Yeah, I don't want to, we're coming out with some data on that real soon.
Okay.
If you will, like it's called a leaderboard of
AI. Give us a
Nice.
teaser. I don't want to steal your thunder, but
yeah,
I want a teaser.
I'm not gonna call the winners specifically. I can kind of definitely Cursor, Copilot, Windsurf, and then Claude Code are what we're seeing, both in the data, but also when we go talk to organizations about kind of what they're looking toward. The other interesting thing, we've all followed like Cursor's astounding growth. What's really interesting is like most organizations are just in experimental mode right now. So they're going in and saying, okay, we're going to like buy them all. We're going to buy them all, give everybody everything, and then we're going to figure out what we're actually going to do. So
see what sticks. Yeah.
Very much up for grabs. Everyone's talking about like Cursor's momentum, but I wrote an article last week saying, yeah, their growth is incredible, but who knows what's going to happen? 12 months from now, companies are going to say, okay, we've been trying all these things. We need to kind of potentially standardize around, a uniform tool chain around this. As you know, Dread, like Claude Code, like there's even these like workflows, shared workflows. There will be leverage in standardizing this tooling, because there's going to be a lot of enabling work that needs to happen to make these tools and agents successful. And so, it's very much up for grabs, but the tools I mentioned are the ones currently I think we're seeing the most interest and highest levels of adoption by companies.
Are you in an extreme growth mode as a result of this? Like
the DX business?
Yeah, because if you have a large swath of enterprises who need to experiment, they need to track how they experiment though, right? So they need frameworks. And that's what you've got. I'm just curious if that has resulted into extreme growth.
6 months ago, even 4 months ago, I would say companies coming at us were looking for help with all kinds of things, and kind of figuring out AI was one of them. Say right now, AI is the number one use case. Yeah, it's the only thing. It's
the only thing anybody cares about.
So it's data for everything from bake-offs, as you said. Hey, we're evaluating 5 different tools, and we want to, with data, understand which of these are most effective for our developers. It's putting turn that into dollars and hours and numbers. Hey, like, what is the impact? Our CFO is saying we should have 50% improvement. What is the data telling us about what this is actually yielding right now? It's understanding, what are the downstream effects? So, okay, we're seeing more code throughput, faster code velocity. Are we also seeing more defects? How's that affecting developer flow state? Are we seeing more incidents? Is the code maintainable? Is developers' ability to then maintain this AI generated code increasing or decreasing? And finally, cost. So with the consumptive based spending now, there's a real question. Okay, we got to figure out how much can we spend? What's the appropriate budget? And then how do we think about making sure that we're spending that money on good things, not like developers screwing around, burning tokens in ways that aren't accretive for the business. So yeah, Adam, it's been a really big tailwind for the DX business for sure.
Well, it has to be one of the most divisive technology hype cycles in human history because, I mean, maybe blockchain was equally as divisive because there was believers and non-believers in blockchain. And there was a lot of hype around blockchain will solve every single problem. And then other people were looking at technology and thinking like, well, it's really good if you need decentralized consensus, which does have some applications and it's finding some use cases, but not like everyone's going to say blockchain will solve it, right? And so you had a lot of division there. And you have a lot of division on this because, you have CFOs saying we should be 50% more productive. And you have people who are boots on the ground saying like, that's not going to happen,
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of pressure on me and my team, which we think is unwarranted. And we're doing all the tools. It's just insane how much, top-down pressure of something that nobody really knows the upside in any sort of clear way, right? We know vague upside. We can feel it. We can maybe report on it a little bit, but we're just not sure where this train is headed. And so it makes sense that DX, your guys' business is in high demand on that one topic because we all want to know.
Yeah.
It's a big open question right now is how much are these tools going to deliver on the promise? So far, it's looking like more than blockchain, but
yeah,
like you said, jury's still out.
It is amazing when I go talk to leaders. I think a lot of leaders, I don't know the percentage, we haven't surveyed them, but I think a lot of leaders really do believe that a large portion of their engineering workforce will be replaceable. Like a lot of leaders I talk to, I can hear it and I can see it in their eyes. They believe that is what's going to happen. And when I talk to like prospective investors, CIOs, it's a question I get asked a lot about, even the DX business. Like, how is this relevant in a world where there's way less developers?
Right.
It's an interesting question.
AX, dude. You need AX. Agent.
Yeah, AX. Yeah.
Agent experience.
So it's an interesting thought exercise. I also talk to leaders who's strongly believe this is not going to like result in any sort of widespread reduction in human headcount. I think that's my personal prediction at this time. I was talking with a leader. Have you guys heard of? It's called Jevons paradox.
I haven't heard this one. No.
Okay, it was just shared with me this week, but it's on Wikipedia. It's the idea that when a resource becomes more efficient, it actually leads to higher utilization. Okay. So meaning is, I think there was an example of something with like oil refineries and, the ability to refine oil became much more efficient. So you'd think that the sort of investment in that would be decreased. Like, oh, we can have less oil refineries because we can refine oil faster. But, it only resulted in like more production, more refineries. And so a similar, applying that to what's happening here, like is if we view these tools as making engineers, maybe not replacing engineers, but making the engineers significantly more productive, that law would then suggest that, well, we're just going to have more. Because, we can get more out of per engineer, and we're just going to have more engineers, we're going to have more software faster, right? So, it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
I'm jiving with that because I think that I hadn't heard of this principle or paradox before, but it does make sense that when you make something more efficient, you tend to use more of it. And that's kind of where I'm leaning towards. Like, you're going to have a recalibration of what a developer is because there's going to be more people willing to do what developers do. And so there's going to be a wider spectrum of what to do. So degree of difficulty, easier, harder. And then I think you're going to see the definition change, so to speak, and you're going to see more people come into it. You're still going to need people to think. I can't extrapolate this big enough, but you're still going to need humans to think about the problem of humanity. You can probably offset a lot of that to AI, but I think you still need like this human intellect, this human, I don't know how to describe it besides feels, like what feels right to humanity. I think you still need that in there because it's not quite in the AI. They're just more bits and bytes more than true intelligence. It's not the same,
Mm-hmm.
And this shows up. So we just published this AI measurement framework. Sent you guys the link. It'd be great to include in the show notes. One of the big questions as we developed this framework was, how do we measure agents? So do we treat agents as people or do we treat agents as extensions of teams and people? In the framework, we discuss this in the paper. We advocate for treating agents as extensions of people and teams. So another way to think about that is that what that effectively means is that a developer is sort of the manager of these agents, but we're still measuring the developer and the team, with the agents being an extension of that team, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So thinking about how do we measure this, you kind of arrive at similar questions to what we were just talking about in terms of the human to agent ratio and balance and relationship and how that will evolve.
Yeah, because the effectiveness of the humans being extended is another factor, because I may be better or worse at leveraging an agent than you might be. And so this team plus 3 agents versus that team plus 5 agents, there's so many variables there to actually whittle it down to any sort of usable information. Well, that's your job, Abi, not mine. So I'm sure you guys will figure it out.
And you hear more about, this is another thing when I talk to leaders, they're thinking a lot about number of agents. Like, what's the right ratio of human to agents? And I think that's a really interesting question. I also think it's not a practical question right now. I mean, this working with like Claude Code, like it's not, we're kind of talking about like single threaded versus multi-threaded. Like it's not, we're not at a point where we're really talking about, I have one QA agent and a designer agent and a front end developer agent.
Right.
That's not really the paradigm. I've seen people kind of
there's some people doing that, but
there's
they're
some
on the
people
edge.
doing that. They're on the edge.
Tip. Yeah.
But that's not really the paradigm right now. So I think right now, human extension is the right way to think about it. But that could change.
In that paper, one of the things that you pull quoted actually was companies are no longer limited by the number of engineers they can hire, but rather the degree to which they can augment them with AI to gain leverage. It's kind of like what you're talking about there is like you're counting agents, you're counting humans, but you really want to just like augment the human ability, not replace it. Although some of the leaders have been smirking, thinking replace.
Right.
Yeah, they're thinking we'll replace them soon.
Gosh.
As soon as the data shows that we can, we will, right?
Bye.
And thankfully the data is
ASAP.
not showing that, right? And I think the secondary effects of the software quality, understanding the bottlenecks in the SDLC, like we talked about, things like code review aren't going away. Human decision making and judgment. Actually, when you think about it, for example, like product management, a lot of seasoned engineering leaders, when I talk to them, know that like product management is actually the big bottleneck, not so much like engineering velocity, right? It's really like product velocity. It's decision making. It's that life cycle from idea to code. And I think we're going to see attention on those bottlenecks magnified because as we optimize the coding, we're already seeing this at DX. Companies come to us, hey, we thought we were supposed to get 50% productivity improvement. We're not seeing that from the AI tools. So now we're asking, what really is our problem? What really are the bottlenecks? And so it is magnifying attention on engineering productivity in general, because folks are really focusing on that topic right now because they're expecting these tools to be transformative in their organizations. So I think that's an interesting trend we're seeing as well. So this could actually result in people caring more and investing more in the other aspects of developer experience that people maybe haven't focused on before because those constraints are being magnified.
When you solve one bottleneck, then you see the other one for what it is, and you start trying to solve that one. So budgets, I'm curious about budgets, because as we look at agents as extensions of engineers, let's imagine that I'm worth $100,000 a year, whatever plus whatever. And if you give me one agent, maybe I'm worth 120. And so are you spending $20,000 a year on an agent per engineer? Are you, because that saves you another engineer perhaps. I'm probably not going to get to 2 engineers. I'm not a 2Xer, but maybe I'm 1.1X. Maybe I'm only worth 110. How much do we spend on this? I'm sure these people are trying to figure it out because budgets very much have to be actualized and decided on, like, how much are we going to spend towards this? Now, when you're just trying every tool there is, my guess is the budget is, don't worry about the budget. We got to figure this out. But eventually those things need to be figured out, because I don't think we're going to get outright replaced like these CEOs want to soon. But certainly we're going to be augmented in a way where your budgeting starts to change. Start to think about, engineer plus. What are your thoughts on that? And have you guys done any work with regard to pricing these things out?
In our paper, we talk about cost and we talk about ways to think about cost. I don't think across the industry are at a point where companies are focused on this problem. They're talking about it because they know it's coming. They know it's the next problem they need to figure out once they get over the kind of experimentation phase. But your example right there, your cost is $100,000 per year. With an agent, your cost is $120,000 per year. Like, what does that mean? Again, this goes back to then should there be less should there be less people?
Right.
Because like we're offsetting that. And so a couple ways that in our paper we talk about, like, ways to think about this. So one is this idea of like human equivalent hours. And this came up in our conversation here before, like being able to kind of measure, okay, how much human equivalent work did this agent do? So not just looking at number of PRs right, but like how much human equivalent work. So if you can measure that, which is hard, then you can take that against AI spend, and you essentially have like this idea of like an agent hourly rate, right? So like your spend divided by number of hours of work produced, work done. That's your agent hourly rate. So I think that's one interesting number for that we're working with companies on putting some focus on. That's a number you can use to start to rationalize what's the right amount of spend. Another interesting metric is like net time gain per developer. So that would be, we talked about the time savings. So how much time is AI saving you? Well, how much are you spending on AI? And then when you take that, convert it into equivalent of what the developer's hourly rate is, are they actually saving time, or do they spend more money than the time they saved?
Right.
So those are two. So agent hourly rate and net time gain per developer are two metrics that, again, hard to get at right now. I mean, a lot of the vendors, it's hard to just get the cost and stay on top of the cost information in general. But I think those are two good frameworks for thinking about the net ROI and right-sizing the investment.
That's a complicated task, that's for sure. But I'm glad we got smart people thinking about it. It'll certainly be a huge concern, maybe 12 to 18 months from now. Eventually, some of these tools got to shake out, I think. And that's what I've kind of been waiting on, is like, I'll let the edge lords do their edging, and then I'll just wait and see what shakes out. But it's been longer. It's been a longer grind. It's probably been 2.5, almost a 3 year since ChatGPT changed the world. And they're just now getting to where, like, for the longest time, I'd replace Google with it, but I wasn't going to use it for any software until this last iteration of models, and they've all gotten to where it's like, okay, we've reached a threshold, which is significant. Going back to your Jevons paradox, that actually tracks with me with just as an N of one. Like I said earlier, I'm not replaceable in this sense, but I'm just writing more software. Like, I'm not just doing less, although I did confess to going and taking a walk earlier than I would have. But I'm also just doing more stuff that I wouldn't have done. Like, it just unlocks me to write more software that I wasn't going to write. And I'm imagining all around the world, imagine every Jira board or Pivotal Tracker or whatever tool you're using, and the icebox, the backlog. And there's things in that backlog that they're just never going to get worked on because other stuff just goes in higher and replaces them. And it's just a constant grind. Mm-hmm. And there's so much unwritten software that we're not going to run out. We're just going to hire. We're going to augment. We're going to write more software. Some of that software is going to be really crappy. We're going to hire more security engineers. And then we're going to hire people to replace the software. I mean, it's going to be just fine, I think.
Just fine, I think.
I think we're going to be just fine. Now, we do change how we do our work. Absolutely. 100% change how you do your work. And I think our teams change slightly. I think our enterprises change. I think less large enterprises, probably. Smaller teams doing more. Businesses don't have to grow that headcount quite as fast, but the large ones stay large. That's just an intuition. I don't know if that jives with you guys.
Well, even with your, confessing to taking a walk early, I wonder if maybe during that walk you solved a harder problem that you haven't been able to solve because you were happier, you felt more fulfilled, and maybe you actually had the brain space to just think. So that walk doesn't
I
actually.
think I did. I'm pretty sure I did.
Yeah, you probably did. I mean, it's not indicative of less output. That's the problem, I think, is, and why I'm so thankful DX is here, because you got the core 4 and this, kind of 4 degree of measurement across teams, and you got this newer one for the AI to measure agents. We need those checks and balances because I'm curious, having said that, if the DX core 4 needs to change or will change because of AI, like do we need to add a happiness metric in there? Or morale? I think it's kind of in there, but maybe you can speak to it more so, Abby. But I'm curious if that DX core 4 needs to be the core 5, because we need to measure the human contentment, I would say, like as an individual. Yeah. And then that individual is part of a team. That team is part of a culture and a culture of a company. I'm curious if that will change because of AI.
Yeah. We talked about this last time I was on the show too.
Did we? Gosh.
We have the idea of happiness encapsulated in our developer experience index measurement.
Okay.
It's very intentionally not called happiness because one of the goals of the core 4 is to make it palatable for executives. And I mean, not to sound cynical,
and executives they don't want to measure.
Happiness. They're like, not now. Back in 2021, they did, when no one could retain developers.
Right.
Right now, they can't. Funny thing, GitHub recently came out with a white paper on how to think about measurement, and we consulted with them closely. They incorporate a lot of like the core 4 measurements in their article. But one thing specifically I kept telling them was, don't call it happiness. They're like, GitHub is all about developer happiness. It's all about developer happiness. I said, don't call it happiness, because the irony, if you call it happiness, then executives won't measure it, and so they won't care about developer happiness. If you kind of frame it as something else, we frame it as developer experience index, which is how you measure effectiveness, because we believe like developer happiness is part of being effective and how you build software. Then they'll measure it and it'll get improved and optimized. And so, it's a naming problem, Adam, but it is encapsulated in there. In terms of like, should the core 4 change? That's something we've looked at closely. And as of now, as a organizational way of thinking about and measuring productivity, we think core 4 still holds true. What's different about AI is you need more, right? There's a lot of new stuff we're measuring. And so the AI measurement framework actually includes the core 4 in one aspect of it, which is understanding how is the overall organizational productivity being impacted pre and post AI, or depending on level of AI adoption. So that's a lot of what we're helping our customers measure right now is, when we look at the adoption curve in our organization, or the maturity curve, I think it's transitioning into now less about adoption, more about maturity. So not just, are people using Copilot daily, but how are they using it, right? Are they using it just for autocomplete? Are they using the agentic stuff? Are they using the AI to help them create the prompt that they feed back to AI, right? Like, so maturity, like how as that maturity increases, does the organization seem more productive based on the data? That's the big question we're trying to help companies answer right now.
What has been your adoption strategy at DX, for these tools? Yeah.
Yeah, we work with Netflix, and one thing that's been on my mind is how much I have not heard Netflix making a fuss about AI. Right? Meaning like
True.
A lot of these companies are like, we need our developers using them. We're measuring how much they're using. Like, I haven't heard that from Netflix, which makes a lot of sense because Netflix is predicated, like their entire culture is, hey, we just hire really senior people. Like developers kind of rule at Netflix, right? Because they entrust that the developers are the best in the world, and that if there's a really useful tool for them to use, they'll use it.
Yeah.
And they're going to use it the right amount. They're not going to use it more because we're measuring them. And so that's the approach I've taken at DX. Now, I've also encouraged, like Cloud Code, for example. So I encouraged a few of our engineers, hey, I'm reading about this workflow, voice to text to Cloud Code to this to that, right? Like one of those more edge. And so I asked a few of our engineers to go try this workflow for a little bit and see what you think. But we definitely haven't mandated it. It's my understanding that everyone's using one or multiple of the tools and doing their own experimentation. But ultimately, I trust the engineers to use it to the degree, to the extent that it's useful. And I think that's I haven't put any pressure on people. I haven't been like, well, if you don't do this, you're going to become obsolete. That's not a message I'm bringing. We have some really interesting conversations around, just candid conversations, like where do we all think this is going, right? And that's also relevant to DX because we're a product company. We're thinking about products around AI tooling, AI enablement tooling, and so we're having those discussions as well.
Can you say more about that?
Well, DX, the business, we've gotten to this interesting point. We've been doing the measurement thing for now almost 4 years. It's going really well. But, a few months ago...
Getting bored of measuring stuff.
Well, a few months ago, I met with Drew Houston, CEO of Dropbox. And he said to me, they've been a customer of ours. He goes, you guys are doing diagnostics really well. Have you thought about what about like the interventions? Like, what about like solving the things that you're measuring? And so, that's actually a question I realize we get asked in different ways, but constantly, like, well, can you actually help us like improve? And
yes,
we've done a lot of things. Like you guys saw this partnership we have with ThoughtWorks. So, hey, partnering with like consulting companies who can come in and help you like with the transformation. We started partnering more with different vendors. Hey, is there a way we can loop in vendors we don't really want to like play favorites, but hey, at least we can map different tools out there to different problems, areas of the SDLC. I think we've gotten to a point where it's like, hey, you know what? Actually, there's like gaps in the market. Like there is no solution for some of these problems. And, should DX just go build them? And now with AI, we're seeing a whole new generation of problems that are being created. Like you guys, my previous company was like a Slack app, right? So like I got in on that right as Slack was just growing like crazy. And so there was it was an entire new paradigm, and an entire generation of businesses were built on Slack. And so I think AI and AI engineering specifically. So this new way of working, this new way of doing software development is actually a new paradigm in which, potentially like the entire tool chain could be rewritten. Like the folks at GitHub and GitLab are worried that Cursor is going to add code review and source control management to their, just go for it, right? Like and completely upends the status quo. And so, at DX, I don't think we're not going after Cursor. We're not going after GitHub. That's for sure. Who are you going after? I think we're going after the adjacent opportunities, the ones that, like on the margins that the big guys aren't. We're not trying to go to war with the Cursor and Copilot. We're trying to solve the adjacent problems we see. Some things we've talked about today, like how do you actually, how do you upskill developers? How do you optimize your code for LLMs? How should platform engineering teams think about sort of self-service and enablement in the same way that if you guys have followed things like Spotify Backstage, right? Like big focus on golden paths, self-service developer enablement. Well, what does that look like in a post-AI world? It's like, well, enablement on what? Golden paths around AI tooling, AI development workflows, shared, Claude, we talked about like Claude has workflows, literally, right? They have workflows. So like, curating that, like how do you create like a standardized set of like workflows that you hire a new developer in your organization, boom, they have this, menu of superpowers, AI powered superpowers that they can. So those are the types of problems. I can't get into specifics today, but those types of adjacent problems, I think, are new constraints for enterprises looking to deploy AI at organizational scale. So not single player mode, right? Like, but more multiplayer mode. How does an organization become successful with these tools? Is a different set of problems.
It's like AI adoption best practices as a service.
Yeah, that's one potential opportunity, right?
That's just one of your ideas.
Yeah, that's not saying that's what we're doing
one
at DX.
But what else is adjacent to this? Like, don't give us your solutions, but what are the other problems?
Spill the beans, Abi. He's going to press you to spill those beans.
Wow.
I'm just kidding with you. He's not pressuring you. He's just curious.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is there's really two things. One is that there's this new set of problems, like some of the things I've hinted at. I think there's this new generation of problems to be solved. The other opportunity is that there's actually the pre-existing problems that are being more magnified, meaning post-AI, it's even clearer that these are real constraints. And in some ways, they're a limiting factor to how much value you get out of AI. Because again, if we go back to the idea of agents as extensions of humans, then the ability of that human and the environment in which that human is working in is actually a more magnified limiting factor. Because now this developer could be getting 150% leverage, whereas before they were just at 100 to use kind of the numbers we were talking about before. So what are the constraints to the human? Well, it's probably the same constraints we've had before, some new ones, but some and those are the types of things we've been measuring for years and seeing go unsolved, and we think maybe we should go try to solve them.
Are you raising money? Where do I invest, Abi? Where do I invest? You sound like you're well positioned to actually take these adjacent markets over, man.
I think GitLab, GitHub, Atlassian have a platform advantage over like a Cursor.
Sure.
Like that battle's on, right? It'll be really interesting to see, like, can GitHub leverage its platform advantage that it has, being the system of record for code, right? And like developer communication, can it convert and being embedded into much of that SDLC, can it convert that into a really amazing platform that can kind of win out over point solutions that are threatening their business model? I think similarly, DX has some platform advantages, right? Namely that we can actually measure what's going on with all this.
You can prove what's going on.
We can prove, yeah. And so, again, I don't think we're not going to jump into the battle of the AI code agents, but we see opportunity to bring a lot of value to our customers by helping them maximize those investments and continue to just optimize their overall engineering productivity.
We're almost out of time, but I gotta ask you for a prediction since you mentioned this, because when you mentioned the popular agents, you did not mention Copilot. Curse was mentioned, Windsurf was mentioned, Claude was mentioned because Jared sort of interjected it, Claude Code at least, but Copilot was not. Can you give me a prediction? What do you think is going to happen over the next year or so, given this tumultuous waters you just mentioned to GitHub or GitLab, the entrenched? What happens if they don't succeed in this transitional moment?
Yeah, if I were Cursor, I'd go for it, right? I would go for the full stack, like be the platform. I think the prediction I'll leave you with is I'm interested in seeing, are we going to end up in kind of like, in the same way we've sort of ended in like multi-cloud? Like, is the end state of this like kind of like multi-agent? Like, different companies will offer agents and models that are more fine-tuned to different types of work. And so for the developer, are we going to be in a world where like, based on the task or even subtask, we're kind of delegating to different providers and services, and then there's an orchestration problem. So that's another problem we're thinking about at DX is, is that the paradigm? And if so, there's a tooling layer needed.
Man, I want to be invited to one of these think tanks y'all have. I want to be in these. I want to be a fly on the wall in the room with all this data you got, this moat you've got, just looking at the landscape and considering.
Less conjecture because they have actual data. Adam and I conjecture, but we don't have any data, so we're just talking out of our certain body parts. All right, Abi, we know you got a hard stop. We'll let you go. Thanks for stopping by again. You're welcome anytime, man.
Yeah, thanks so much. Always fun chatting with you guys. Keep up
Bye,
the great
friends.
work. Okay.
Bye.